Well, welcome. We are going to speak today about the Ten Commandments. When we Americans think of law, we generally think of those everyday laws by which we live, things like speeding or not speeding, stop signs, those sorts of things. And the ultimate arbiter or judge of these laws for us would be the justices of the Supreme Court. And the symbol of this court is the Supreme Court building in Washington, D.C. This building is referred to on the Supreme Court's own website as America's Temple of Justice. And if we look on the eastern pediment of the Supreme Court building, which is the back side of the building, there are three statues at the very center, kind of at the peak. And these three statues are of lawgivers. One of the statues is that of Confucius. Another is Solon. And Confucius and Solon are standing on either side of a figure seated there, holding two tablets. And this is none other than Moses himself. Additionally, if we go into the court chambers where the actual cases are heard, we will find on the walls what they call frieze, or frieze. And they are panels of wood artwork. And on the southern wall, the frieze there has between the figure of fame and authority the image of Moses with the two overlapping tablets of the Ten Commandments. So why do we find Moses with the Ten Commandments not once but twice depicted on the Supreme Court building and in the court chamber? Are we not told that, well, the Ten Commandments are religious in nature, and therefore they should not be displayed in public, and certainly they should not be displayed in and on public buildings? So why is Moses with those Ten Commandments allowed to be depicted on the Supreme Court building and in the court chambers? Of all places, why there? Well, perhaps the answer lies within the images themselves. As I mentioned, Moses is portrayed with Confucius and Solon on the pediment. In the frieze, he is depicted with, among others, Menes and Hammurabi. We also find Solomon and others in that same frieze. And all of them are lawgivers, or they are philosophers concerned with correct moral human behavior. And so Moses, in these depictions, is seen as a lawgiver because God gave the Israelites the Ten Commandments through Moses. So Moses is depicted with other great lawgivers and philosophers because the Ten Commandments are among the first laws governing human behavior. Now, what exactly is God telling us through Moses and these 10 commandments? He's telling us what we need to do in order to have what we would call a right relationship with God and with our neighbor. Now, normally, how do we see the 10 commandments depicted? They're portrayed as 2 tablets. On one, you have the commandments 1 through 3. On the other, you have the commandments 4 through 10. This is because those first 3 commandments have to do with our relationship with God, what we need to do to have that right relationship with God. And the other 7 commandments have to do with our behavior regarding others, or what we Christians would call our neighbor. What do we need to do? What do we need to avoid? What is the correct moral behavior in order to have that right relationship with our neighbor? Now, God gave the 10 commandments not just to the Israelites. He gave them really to all people everywhere. And how do we know this? Because God wrote these commandments in the hearts of men. As St. Paul tells us in his letter to the Romans. Certainly, at least the last 7 commandments would be what we call natural law. These are things which we know instinctively. We instinctively know not to kill others, not to steal from them. We know instinctively that it is wrong to covet our neighbor's spouse or their possessions. We know it's wrong to lie. We know in our hearts that all of these things are wrong and that they don't lead to that right relationship with each other. And this is why we call them natural law, because we know through our human nature these behaviors are wrong. This is the way God created us. So what we find in the 10 commandments, and I would add what is being affirmed by the very presence of Moses' image on the Supreme Court building, in the court chambers, is that the 10 commandments are the natural law put into a code of conduct, let's call it, a law for people to live by. This is the law that God wrote first in our hearts when he created man. And so this is why the 10 commandments are really for everyone. And it's why we find them depicted on our Supreme Court building and in the court chambers. And thank you for your attention, and may God bless you.